Okay, so welcome everyone to part 10 of this series, um, Zen readings, uh, Zen study from the teachings of Master Empty Cloud, Zhu Yun. This is part 10 in the series. We keep reading through it, keep going through these teachings, and each video, each time can be watched as it is. You don't need to go back and watch everything up until now, but each stream, each teaching can be watched as it is. So as we usually do, we'll take about 10 minutes to give people time to join in live. And then if you're watching the recording, you can move ahead to the 10-minute mark on your slider. And you can join us when we begin at 10 minutes from now. Okay, hi there, Karuna. Nice to see you. Audio is not working, but it's okay. You don't have to worry about it. Sorry, Karuna, we moved to another channel, so you might need to turn on your camera again if you like. And I'll just make an announcement to everyone that we'll be getting started soon. Oh, okay, can see you. Yeah, all right. And hi there, Anna. Hello, Francie. And Philip. Hi there, Philip. And I see Zeros over in the YouTube. Welcome, Zeros. And Nia. Hi there, Nia. And Aridia. Hi. And Guy. Hello, Guy. And Robert and Scott. And David and Maximiliano, Jaden. Great. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Got another 5 minutes to get settled, to get comfortable before we begin. Hello there, Yulia. Glad that you're here. And Chris. Everyone is invited and encouraged to use their cameras if it's accessible. Sometimes it's not accessible because of connection issues or space issues or anything like that. So if it's not easy, don't worry about it. But if you can, please do share your camera. This brings us a sense of really being together in the same space. So we can see, we are seen, and there's a intimacy and a sense of reality to what we're doing when we can see and feel each other. I think it supports that at least. If you're if you're here and you don't have a camera on or you're watching through YouTube, don't think that you're any less participating, but I think it's supportive. And RJ and Dia, welcome. And Shiro and Pen, nice to see you, Pen. Yeah, my microphone is on a pen, so some kind of pen. So, and hi, Anushka. Over on YouTube, we have Kushik, Nathan, Mindful, and Susan. Cold, wet Scotland. Well, it's not raining here, but it should be raining tomorrow, and it is cold. A lot of people are cold, so we can be cold together. Also, we have Sarah. Sarah? How to Sarah? Saria. Oh, Sarah and Anna and Eduardo and Ruli. Yeah, who are here joining at the temple, sitting with us. So just another 2 minutes to get settled in, to decide if we actually want to be here. And we can kind of get still and check in with our intention. Why do we want to be here? Why are we here? And whatever intention we happen to find, we can bring that in deeply. We bring that intentionality into our body. That intention to be here, to practice, to listen deeply, to be deeply. And that deeply means wholeheartedly, with a fullness, with a richness, really showing up to what's happening right now. So we find that comfortable, stable, convenient position to put the body down, to be comfortable and also present, aware, awake. As we find that position to put the body down, to let the body be still, we can start to give extra attention to our breath. That is the breathing process. And we can breathe in deeply whatever it is that we need at this moment. Maybe some of us are sleepy, tired, so we need to breathe in that awakeness, that alertness, that energy. And for some of us, maybe we're a bit overstimulated, a bit stressed or anxious, a lot of activity going on inside. So as we breathe in deeply, bringing that sense of relaxation, letting go, calming. Our lives can be very busy and full of a large diversity of activities, experiences, directions in which to go. But for now, putting down all those choices, opportunities, possibilities, and just taking up at this moment the practice of breathing, the practice of the body just being here right now. Not so much doing something, more allowing ourselves, allowing the body and the mind to just be as they are right now. Breathing and aware of the body, breathing and aware of thoughts, but not stuck, not overly involved, just aware, just breathing and being aware. Take all the distractions and all those thoughts or mental, physical phenomena. Instead of being a distraction, instead of being a problem, just another reminder to let the body be still, to breathe in exactly what we need at this moment. Just breathing and being aware. At this moment, no goal, no direction, no result that we're moving towards. Just breathing and being aware, allowing gravity to do its work. Allow the shoulders, the arms, everything to relax, everything to settle. Just in the same way that a glass of orange juice, if you put it down, all the pulp, all the extra just falls to the bottom, just sinks. You don't shake orange juice, you don't move it to allow that pulp to settle. Putting ourself down, letting the self come to a rest. Just sitting here, just breathing, being aware. So as we hear the sound of the bell, we are invited to connect deeply, connect fully with the independence of our meditation practice. That this ability to calm, this sense of peace, this settling of our body and mind is not in any way coming from some outside situation, some outside person or object, but that this practice of peacifying, settling, calming is just a natural practice that does not depend on anything outside. Okay, so we will begin our reading, our listening to the teachings of Zen Master Empty Cloud. I encourage you to listen as a meditation, but also to bring up this sense of a kind of curiosity and exploration, that you're not so much listening to a lecture or listening to some kind of official monk teacher on YouTube, but that there really is an intimacy and the possibility here to talk about what we read through, to ask a question if we're not clear about something, and to emphasize more if we don't understand something, and kind of bring that up. Okay, so this is part 10. This is the 10th time we've come together as a community and have been reading through these teachings from Zen Master Empty Cloud. So if you find that you like these teachings a lot, there's content to go back to from this series. You can go back and watch some of the recordings from our past meetings if you like. And we've been reading from the very traditional Pali Canon, a single verse, before we kind of get into the book that we're reading together. So I just want to offer another one of those verses. And this one is entitled A Forest. And this is from the very traditional Pali Canon, the oldest Buddhist texts. At Savatthi, where the Buddha lived, standing to one side, that Devata recited this verse in the presence of the Buddha. Devata, I should look up this word. I'll look it up right now. What is a Devata? I have very poor memory for anything that is a deva. So basically, like a kind of deity in Buddhism, but more a kind of protective being, a protective energy, a high being, we can say, kind of special being, special person. Um, so this being recited this verse to the Buddha. Those who dwell deep in the forest, peaceful, leading the holy life, eating but a single meal a day, why is their complexion so serene? The Buddha said, they do not sorrow over the past, nor do they hanker for the future. They maintain themselves with what is present. Hence, their complexion is so serene. Through hankering for the future, through sorrowing over the past, fools dry up and wither away, like a green reed cut down. So let's continue now with our reading of the teachings from Zen Master Empty Cloud. We're still going through his teachings on meditation methods, the right ways to practice meditation. We looked at Hua To, which is kind of a questioning, kind of like a koan meditation where we ask, who am I? Who am I really? Who am I? We ask that question very deeply and continuously as our meditation practice. And then we looked at the meditation on sound. So meditation as non-judgmental listening, listening without any kind of judgment, listening without conceptuality, and how just listening in that way can put us in a position to become enlightened, or at least to develop a lot in our meditation practice, just listening. And now we're on meditation on a specific object. And one of the big analogies, the big ideas that was presented last time, or even the time, last time, was that this practice of guest and host, or host and guest. So when we are practicing meditation, we practice to be like a good host, a good innkeeper. And so there are travelers, thoughts, sensations, memories, etc., that come up into our awareness. And the practice of being a good host, just like being a good innkeeper, is to accept these sensations, these thoughts as they come, and to let them go as they're ready. So we don't get overly involved with any particular thought or sensation, physical or mental, as we're practicing meditation, but more so we accept them to be there when they are, and we allow them to go without any disturbances when they're ready to leave. So thoughts and sensations arising and passing away. Now we'll move on to meditation on a specific object. Sometimes a guest is not transient. Sometimes a guest comes to the inn with the intention of staying a while. Well, then the host must pay them special attention. The innkeeper does not investigate the guest object before he lets him sign the register. This is another way of saying that before sitting down to meditate, we do not go and study the object that we will be meditating on. Suppose we pick as our object a rose. This is a particularly nice object for Zen meditation because, after all, roses are one of China's gifts to the world horticulture, and this practice of Zen comes from China, originates in China. A rose can engage our senses in many ways. So you can imagine kind of meditating on a rose, sitting down for your meditation and looking directly at a rose for your meditation object. After we have attained calmness and regulated our breathing, we begin by gently closing our eyes and trying to construct a rose in our mind. We do not allow ourselves to digress into personal recollections about roses. We see a stem, how long it is, how thick, how green, and so on. We see thorns, their shape, their points, their arrangements on the stem. Again, we don't digress into thinking about specific occasions when we were struck by thorns. Perhaps we gingerly feel the thorn, but only in our mind. Then we come to the various parts of the flower. Depending on our knowledge of botany, we assemble the flower. Pistil, stamen, petals, and so on. The petals are so soft. What color are they? The pollen is so yellow and powdery. We see the yellow dust on nearby petals. A rose has fragrance. What is the specific scent of our rose? We actually begin to smell it. This is how to meditate on a rose or any object. Remember, we never allow ourselves to digress into roses I have known, or instances in the past when roses were given or received. No thinking at all. We just become aware of a rose in all its parts and sensations. Soon the rose will glow in our mind. The rose will be of such exquisite beauty that we will know we have seen the ideal rose of heaven itself. Afterwards, we may squeal with delight. Not many people are permitted to view one of heaven's treasures. So this a kind of meditation on an object and meditation on a mental object, kind of a visualization as well. But when we practice any kind of object-based meditation, we look into it just as closely, even if we take the breath as our object, or the body as our object, or counting as our object. We don't think about past situations where we were breathing. We don't think about um, kind of worried about how we're breathing, but we're looking as closely, as in depth as possible into that object of our meditation. For example, focusing on the sensations of the nose, right here under the nose, looking as closely as possible as at those sensations as the breath flows in and flows out. Meditation on the Buddha's name. Meditation on the Buddha's name is a very common practice in Mahayana Buddhism. And so it's basically a twofold practice. On one end, you have a very direct reciting of a word. And so this helps to still and concentrate the mind. And it could be any word. You could recite flower, 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 flower. And this can be a kind of meditation to concentrate, to gather your mind, to collect your mind. But the other side of this, when we talk about meditation on the Buddha's name, is that we are reciting something that has a deeper meaning. So, for example, we can recite, I've practiced to recite Namo Guanyin Pusa. And Guanyin Pusa is this bodhisattva of compassion, or this archetype, this bigger than myself archetype of compassion, kindness, patience, generosity. And so if I were to be practicing that Buddha recitation, to recite Namo Guanyin Pusa, Namo Guanyin Pusa, it's not just that I'm collecting my mind, but I'm also recollecting this deeper experience of compassion, this aspect of myself that is powerfully, intimately, intensively all compassionate. And so I bring that into my mind through the recitation of Namo Guanyin Pusa. And in Buddhism, it's an interesting situation because some schools do emphasize, this bodhisattva or that bodhisattva, this kind of higher archetype of humanity, of what's possible. So, like an archetype of compassion, or an archetype of wisdom, or an archetype of the vow to help others. And so, the thing in Buddhism is that we don't believe in a self, we don't believe in a separate soul. So, as much as you are real, that archetype, that aspect of humanity is also real, just as real as you are. So when you approach it that way, when you consider it in that way, it's a very unique kind of practice, because the Western logical mind will say, well, that's not real. I'm real. This bodhisattva, or this entity of compassion, this all compassionate being, is not real. I'm real. But from the Buddhist perspective, there is no real self soul. So the bodhisattva of compassion, this Guanyin Pusa, who's made the vow to save all sentient beings, sometimes Guanyin Pusa is depicted as having 1 million arms, 1 million hands, and on each hand is an eye. So with each of these eyes, Guanyin Pusa can see the suffering of the world. And with each of these hands, Guanyin Pusa can mend, take care, heal those sufferings. So that's a compassion. That's the bodhisattva of compassion. So meditation on the Buddha's name. In Mahayana Buddhism, the Buddha Amitabha, the Buddha of the West, is very important. Chinese people pronounce Amitabha Amitofo. And so repeating the name Amitofo is an excellent practice. The Buddha Amitabha is It's like a Buddha of infinite light. So it's this person who, once again, a bodhisattva, vows to save all sentient beings before they become enlightened. And this is a vow that we can bring into our own practice, that we will save all beings, we will liberate all beings. I mean, this helps us to stay consistent in our practice. And it's also such a big vow, it's such a big commitment that there's no limit to the energy that can come from a commitment like that until you really save all sentient beings, or until you liberate, relax, release all tensions, tightnesses, aspects of yourself that are in a state of suffering. So, first we keep in mind an image of the Buddha Amitabha. We also acknowledge our great debt to him. Did not the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara Guanyin spring from his brow? Where would Mahayana salvation be without our beloved Guanyin? So we keep the Buddha in our mind as we repeat his sacred name. So this is more going into like Mahayana Buddhist tradition, that someone who was raised in Mahayana Buddhism will have a kind of background of experience and background of information in which to utilize these different ideas and relationships of archetypes and beings. So, what is the wrong way to repeat the Buddha's name? That's easy to describe. Think of a sick person who is given a bottle of penicillin pills. Think of them sitting there holding the unopened bottle, repeating penicillin, penicillin, penicillin. Will that cure them? No. They must take the penicillin into themselves. They must swallow and assimilate it. Merely repeating the name of the medicine will not cure them. Okay, that's the end of chapter 3. So we're on to chapter 4, which is the Buddha's flower sermon. And we probably won't read through all of this, but we can read through a little bit. No, it's a short chapter. So we'll read through chapter 4 here, the Buddha's flower sermon. There's a little picture here that's nice that I can maybe share with everyone. I'll show it on the camera. Well, you can see half of it at least. So a monk holding up a flower. So this is a very important original Buddhist teaching story about Zen and the starting of Zen. A good teacher is better than the most sacred books. A good teacher is better than the most sacred books. Books contain words, and Zen cannot be transmitted by mere words. We can say enlightenment. I suppose you will think, well, if this old man says that words are useless, why does he talk so much? Religion has many mysteries, and why teachers say that words can never suffice, and then talk and talk until their students' ears turn to stone, is perhaps the greatest mystery of them all. The Buddha stood beside a lake on Mount Gudarakata and prepared to give a sermon to his disciples who were gathering to hear him speak. As the Enlightened One waited for his students to settle down, he noticed a golden lotus blooming in the muddy water nearby. He pulled the plant out of the water, flower, long stem, and root. Then he held it up high for all his students to see. For a long time he stood there, saying nothing, just holding up the lotus and looking into the blank faces of his audience. Suddenly his disciple Mahakashyapa smiled. He understood. What did Mahakashyapa understand? Everybody wants to know. For centuries, everybody's been asking, what message did the Buddha give to Mahakashyapa? Some people say that the root, stem, and flower represent the three worlds, underworld, earth, and sky, and that the Buddha was saying that he could hold all existence in the palm of his hand. Maybe. Some people say he was reversing the great mantra Mani Padme Hum. The jewel is in the lotus. When the Buddha held the flower in his hand, the lotus was in the jewel. Some people say that the root, stem, and flower stood for the base, spine, and thousand-petaled lotus crown of the chakra yoga system, and that by raising the plant he was advocating that discipline. Other people say it could just as easily indicate a result of that discipline, the Trinitarian fulfillment. As the Buddha was father and mother, he was also son. The lotus born and the lotus holding Maitreya, future Buddha, the jewel eye. That's certainly something to think about. In Zen, we're not sure of too many things. We only really know one. Enlightenment doesn't come with a dictionary. The bridge to nirvana is not composed of phrases. As old master Lao Tzu wrote, the Tao that we can talk about is not the Tao we mean. So the Buddha spoke in silence, but what did he say? Perhaps he was saying, from out of the muck of samsara, the lotus rises pure and undefiled. Transcend ego consciousness. Be one with the flower. There, the Buddha gave a lecture, and nobody had to take any notes. So we can all take a moment to find our meditation position. We can bring our mind, our awareness to the presence of the body at this moment. And for these few moments together, as we hear the sound of the bell, taking up this practice of not relying on words and phrases, not relying on thoughts and beliefs, being in a position where we do not need a dictionary. As we hear the sound of the bell, simply breathing and being aware. In walking the path of meditation, Buddhism, spiritual development, rather than it being this complicated, convoluted system of people, ideas, levels, from out of the muck of our delusion, our attachment, our suffering, the lotus rises, pure and undefiled, completely as it is at this moment, aware, awake. Transcend ego consciousness. Transcend constant self-fixation. Be one with the flower. Be one with this breath, this body, this experience as it is at this moment. Bringing our full attention, our full awareness to the body and mind at this moment. From this confusing, difficult, muddy experience of self-focus, allow the flower, the lotus flower of clear seeing, just being aware, transcending our selfishness with each and every moment. Each and every sensation, each and every experience. This reminder, this invitation to return to just seeing, just hearing, just smelling, just feeling the body as it is right now. From out of the muck of a world of illusion, the lotus flower rises pure and undefiled. Transcend ego consciousness. Be one with the flower. Be one with this awakening mind, this peace mind, this gentleness mind. Just breathe, just be aware. Okay. Would anyone like to ask a question or share experience? We have a lot of people here, so certainly someone must have some kind of question, some experience to share. Oftentimes, it is the people who have questions they are so ready to ask that need to wait, probably not needed to ask that question. And the people who are more reserved, more kind of not sure to ask a question, to speak out, those are the people, those are the questions that are most often quite valuable and helpful to share. So David put a question in the text chat, and David says, can you explain a little bit more about no self? Why is there no self for Buddhism? So one of the ways that no self is translated, and I like this translation a lot, is interbeing, interconnectedness. So one of the primary ideas of the self is that there is a self that exists separate from its relationship to everything else. And so when we look at the nature of a self, like to call a tree, or a chair, or to say, I am, I am Bhante Vajrapanyo, I am this Buddhist monk. In a practical way, in a relative way, we can say that there's some truth to it. But in an absolute way, we cannot separate Bhante Vajrapanyo, me as a monk, from what's happening right now, in who I am, in my existence, in my selfhood. Just in the same way that we cannot separate a chair from the place where it is, from the parts that make up that chair. And so the real, it's very practical, and it's not, to believe in no self is not really so important. And it's not even something that, I rarely talk about no self, even though it's something very important to me and something I value a lot. I rarely talk about it because the practicality is much more important than the belief in Buddhism. Believing in no self doesn't mean anything. It's just kind of a maybe a tendency that you have to appreciate this idea of no self, but it's not. There's no weight to it. There's no real relevance to a appreciation of the idea of no self versus what the Buddha was talking about, anatta or anicca, one of them. So the teaching here for me is, when you talk about a self, not just to take it for granted or to have like a religion of a self. So when you say, what is the self, what is that about, rather than what is the no self? You could ask it that way too. But when we ask a question like, what is the self? It's to look through our own experience into what we are experiencing, to look closely. So when we ask, what is the self in my fingernails? Is the self in the interaction of my body and cold water? Is the self, what I see or what I feel at this moment? And it's to look very closely, and not even really to believe in no self, but to ask, what is the self, in a more direct way, to look into it, to explore it. And our understanding in Buddhism is that when you look very, very, very scientifically and deeply into the nature of mind, you you find that, first of all, that there's not really, that you are not your body. And that's a very general spiritual concept that gets thrown around, but the weight of that, the heaviness of that, comes from well-minded people, clear-minded people who have gone through the meditation practice and have experienced, not in like a trip, not in like this kind of special state, but in the place of most clarity, like most clearly seeing you, from you, like your clear seeing, there not being a body there. And so if someone has that experience, then they're and they experience that from the place of being more grounded and more clear-minded than they've ever been before. It's going to be pretty clear that you are not your body if you have that experience. And then even going much, much deeper into meditation, to states that I wouldn't say I've experienced, you eventually find that there's this self or this soul, especially this like general idea, like the character of ourselves is certainly not real, not fixed, not permanent. And it can be liberating in two ways that come to mind. One is that if you're arrogant, if you're proud, if you have like all this money and this power and people really like you, it can humble you. It can help you to detach from all that and not take yourself so seriously. And on the other side of things, if you've had a tough go of it, and if you've had a lot of sufferings and issues with yourself and how you've acted in the world and who you've been in the world up to this point, well, there's a different kind of liberation. Oh, I'm not this horrible person. I'm not a bully. I'm not a toxic person. I'm not someone who is totally defined by my thoughts that happen to come up and go away, or my traumas, but that actually this self, this me, is a ongoing, developing, unfolding happening that is most truthfully pointed to and experienced now, in what's happening right now, and not in some abstract idea about myself or some true story of myself. Um, and that's not to reject responsibility, because actually to practice this way and to be with it this way is to be the most responsible. Not to reject anything, not to say, well, I don't have a self, I'm not responsible for that, you can't blame me for that. But to be fully responsible for what's happening right now and taking care of it with the utmost sincerity. And David also said, also, can you explain more about meditation with the Buddha name? How do you take the Buddha? How do you take Buddha in? So I'll give an example of this for me with Namo Guanyin Pusa. So Guanyin is this very well-known, very famous entity, being, in archetype in Mahayana Buddhism. And Guanyin Pusa, you'll see many statues and iconography. It's kind of like Mother Mary or something, or certain saints in the Catholic tradition. But Guanyin represents this great compassion, this great loving kindness without any exception, without any debate. Like, doesn't matter who you are, what you did, anything, Guanyin is going to express the utmost powerful compassion to you, just to pour this water of absolute compassion over your whole body in any given situation. And so I had times in my life when I was going through a lot of stress and suffering and vulnerability and confusion. And that image and that kind of um, representation, that embodiment, that archetype of Guanyin Pusa really resonated with me. This motherly figure as well, tends to be quite motherly as well. This compassion. And so when I chant, for example, Namo Guanyin Pusa, Namo Guanyin Pusa, Namo Guanyin Pusa, and usually chanting with the inner voice, this becomes something that is really quite powerful, because it's not just concentrating and collecting the mind, but there's also this figure, this representation, this embodiment of compassion that is not focused on myself. And it kind of, it, you're bringing that in fully. You're putting yourself fully into it. Um, you're taking in not just reciting the name, but also the energy of what that name represents. You could also chant Budo, 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 and be taking in fully um, what the Buddha represents, this great enlightenment, this great wisdom, this ability to awaken, to enlighten. If you wanted to do that kind of practice, probably you can do some reading of that, of Guan Yin Pusa, some kind of background teachings of what that represents. And a lot of times for me, it was just seeing the iconography of Guan Yin, like the statues and this physical representation of absolute compassion. And that resonated with me a lot. So that's one of the ways to do it. Anyone else have a question? Something to share? Okay, here, you take the. I'll turn the camera towards you also so people can see. Oh, okay. Yes, that's you. Okay, go ahead.
So the last days, I've heard a lot about attachments. So that in meditation, you try to give up on attachments or on your ego. And I wanted to ask which practices someone can use, or what's the idea behind to give up on the ego. And yeah.
Okay, so practices for giving up the ego. A big thing, a main thing is generosity and humbling yourself, putting yourself down, putting yourself low. And if we can put other people up, and this is a big theme in Buddhism about monks having a higher status or monks sitting higher than lay people. And certainly it can be problematic when you have any kind of power structure or anything like that. But the practice of being able to put yourself down, your desires, your idea of what's right, your idea of who you are and how other people can treat you, as you put that as low as possible, as low down to the ground as possible, you can see that there is a peace and a balance and a joy that comes from service, from giving up rather than getting and keeping and holding on to. And we were reading earlier in this book about how any little selfish action, any little thing that you do that is motivated by selfishness rather than generosity, like me, mine, I'm going to keep this for myself, you shouldn't be using this, that kind of thing, is going to put you in have a result later of tragedy, of suffering, of misery, because this selfishness is only going to lead to more suffering, more misery, because the body's going to fall apart, our environment's going to fall apart, our social status, our position, everything is going to fall apart. So all of these things that this self hangs on to and holds on to are just going to be sources of suffering. So every time we make those actions to, especially to take from another and give to ourselves, it's just a mess. So a lot of generosity, with your time, with your effort, asking people, what can I do for you? Serving for others. And when we do meditation, we practice to put down our ego, because the ego doesn't want to sit there. The ego wants to be hooked up to some kind of pleasure machine, and be stimulated for eternity, right? That's what the ego wants to do, and eventually that'll happen in meditation, but in a selfless way, and in a way that promotes detachment and the dissolving of the self, the ego. So continuing to practice meditation, not following a schedule is very important as well. So when we have a schedule to follow, we wake up and we say, well, maybe I need to stay in bed a little bit longer. I need to be a little bit warmer because that's what's healthy for me. That's what's good for me. When we can put that down and just start and just go and follow the schedule, ego reduces. The self reduces and calms because we see over time that we don't just keep getting what we want. We don't keep feeding into like, oh yeah, that's right, oh yeah, that's right, oh yeah, that's right, I'll just do this, because eventually you follow that to a certain point, and then you wake up in a ditch somewhere without clothes and without any money, and you've lost everything that you've been working towards because you kept endorsing the ego. You kept letting the self kind of have this put one flagpole after another, and before you know it, you've lost what you really are trying to do. You've lost your practice. So, yeah, follow the schedule that we have here, and really focus more on asking other people what you can do for them, being generous. When we have the chanting in the morning with the Buddha, really say that stuff. Lift the Buddha up as high as you can, and then you're going to be as low as you can. And all of the religiosity of the Buddha being the enlightened one, the holy one, all that, you just kind of you use it as a tool to put yourself down and to pick wisdom up, to pick enlightenment up, to pick clarity up, freedom up. Yeah, so that's the way to go about it. But you're staying here, you're practicing at the temple. We're following a very good schedule together. So, it's we're going to keep making progress and putting our ego down. I definitely, feeling that being here, coming from a meditation retreat before I came here, and still maintaining a schedule and supporting one another and not indulging in selfishness too much. So you just keep practicing the way that you're practicing, and you'll have the result that the ego will lessen, the ego will reduce. Okay? All right. All right, so Jaden, we do have some activities here at the temple, so we'll take one more question. Um, and then we'll bring our time together to a close. Jaden says, sharing a verse, should a seeker not find a companion who is better or equal, let them resolutely pursue a solitary course. There is no fellowship with the fool. I've been wondering about this passage in the Dhammapada and was wondering if you had any insight to share about it. So this is actually this is a sentiment from some of the earliest Buddhist teachings about being solitary. There's actually a sutra called the Rhinoceros Horn Sutra, and we'll probably read it. We'll look at it together sometime. But it's one of like the earliest Buddhist teachings that represents the earliest kind of thought about life as a monk and as a Buddhist practitioner. And it talks about being solitary and wandering alone like a rhinoceros, and really having a kind of exceptional standard that you apply to situations, people, environments, so that you don't put yourself in a situation where you are in fellowship with a fool, because there's no fellowship. It's just difficulty and poison when we spend time with fools. So sometimes, I do activities where I'll go into different Discord servers or different spaces where it's a more playful, more kind of younger people, more rough and rowdy kind of environment, the younger people there. And I often advise them that, don't just sit somewhere and listen to nonsense. And especially if there's an innocence to it, then that's one thing. But when we are around people who are really toxic, and when they are outwardly expressive and kind of pushing out with toxicity, aggression, selfishness, um, anger, greediness, and they really are kind of pushing this out, that is a very precarious position to be in. And we should really do our best to not spend time in those environments. And sometimes that's quite sad because a lot of times those people who are more rough and more aggressive can be in positions of leadership in environments that we would like to be in. But in general, that's the teaching, is that if you are a seeker on the path, or if you're someone who's working to moderate your mental health, your emotional health, be very careful about the time that you're spending with foolish people, with aggressive people, with toxic people. And they're human beings. You know, we don't need to label people as being evil or bad. Um, but a lot of people are unskillful, and a lot of people have these kind of difficulties and sufferings in their lives that they're not really able to get a hold of. And as seekers on the path, we have to support ourselves. We have to heal ourselves before we can heal other people. You don't go to a surgeon with broken hands and say, well, hurry up, let's get this done. Right? It's you need to heal yourself. Your own hands need to be healed before you're ready to do work on other people. Okay, so that's the insight I have about that. Okay, so I want to thank everyone for their participation. We will end as we usually do with 3 sadhus: excellent, wonderful, auspicious, ideal. And when we do this, we are recognizing our practice, our efforts, and the wholesome result of those efforts. And we're kind of really, we're not shy about that. We're not confused about what we are doing now to be a skillful, wholesome, healthy activity. And so when we say those sadhus, we bring that up um, together. Okay, so we can all bring our hands together, and we will chant 3 sadhus to end our practice, right? Sadhu. 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 Okay, thank you, dear fellow practitioners, for joining. Um, we're still having these daily events. The doors are open and unlocked all the time. So this place is your place. It's a refuge. It's your temple, your home temple. And really happy that you keep coming and participating and supporting this space with your practice and your presence. Okay? Take care, everyone. See you again soon. Great. So we shall have our final work meeting before our vacation.